Chris Mackowski for Emerging Civil War, and I'm out here at Mine Run. A little breezy this morning. Of course, as soon as I mention the wind, it becomes too windy to actually hear me. So I'll just recap what I'm saying, and this will sound like an old Godzilla movie where my voice doesn't match my lips. I'm talking about Governor K. Warren getting into position during the Mine Run campaign on the right flank of the Army of Northern Virginia. Warren is in temporary command of the Union's 2nd Corps, and he has elements of the 3rd and 6th Corps with him as he gets into position. In that direction toward the Confederates. It took him all day on the 29th of November to march into position, so by the time he finally got himself on Lee's flank, it was too dark for him to comfortably launch the attack, so he decided to wait until morning. Rumor, post-war, said that he spread out like a vast host across these fields behind me, lit a lot of campfires to show that he had great strength, hoping he could spook Robert E. Lee. In fact, that did not happen, although Lee did know that the Federals were here. Rather than getting spooked, though, what Lee does is he extends his line. And I'm going to swing around to look at the Confederate position for a second. He's going to stretch his line off along that ridge line in that direction for another mile toward what today is Antioch Church. There was a church there at the time as well. And so rather than retreat, he's going to dig in. Federal soldiers who are now off in that direction, now that I've swung the camera around, have heard the fortifications. And in the morning, when Warren wakes up, he sees a daunting sight in front of him. And it's important to remember this is really the first time in the war that either side has used extensive fortifications. That's going to be a hallmark of the Overland Campaign in 1864. A couple times the armies have used field fortifications during battle, but this is the first time that we've really had one army looking at another dug in and ready to receive an attack. And of course, Warren, being an engineer, is sensitive to that, understands how formidable this is going to be, understands the topography is working against him, and he starts to get cold feet. It might also be because temperatures have dropped well below freezing. There are actually soldiers who are out on picket duty who freeze to death overnight. Soldiers talk about the plummeting temperatures and how miserable it was. That's also going to play into Warren's decision making because he thinks that, as this attack plane gets littered with wounded soldiers, if they're making their advance in that direction, these men are apt to freeze to death on the field before any help can even get to them. So the wounded, where in a regular battle they might have the chance to get evacuated from the field and triage, they might not have that opportunity here because of the cold. Warren has got Alexander Webb's division off in this direction. On the other side of the road here, he's going to have Alexander Hayes' division. Terry's 3rd Corps division is going to be off there protecting the flank, and the idea is to push across these fields. But Warren says it would take about 8 minutes to cross the distance, and during that time, they would be under constant barrage from Confederate artillery, and then when they would get close enough, the Confederate infantry would open up. And so he thinks running that gauntlet is something that his men just aren't capable of doing, considering the defenses they're going to be assaulting, the long stretch they've got to cross, the possibility for extra suffering because of the cold, and he's going to call off that attack. He'll send word back to his commander, George Gordon Meade, whose head will nearly explode, and he says, "That man has ruined me. He has half my army." And Meade's going to ride out here in absolute fury, jump off his horse, get right in Warren's face. There's going to be a tense conversation that lasts about 15 minutes. The two commanders are then going to spend some time looking at these Confederate fortifications that extend from an abandoned railroad cut off in that direction toward Antioch Church off in that direction. And Meade, also an engineer, understands that his men are going to be facing something unprecedented, and he is going to agree with Warren's assessment, and he's going to call off that attack. He's going to look for other places along the line where he might have the opportunity to try to make something of this. But really by this point, Lee is so dug in and has such a strong position all along his line that Meade is going to strike out and will eventually give the order that night for his men to pull off and head back toward the Rapidan River and cross safely, where they can then get back into their winter encampments that they had set up just before the start of this campaign. So it's going to be a really tense few days for Meade as he gets across here and is continually foiled, not only by Robert E. Lee, but by the topography, by the ineptness of some of his commanders, particularly 3rd Corps Commander Blinky French. I always like to blink when I say his name. Henry Prince, one of French's division commanders, a lot of blame lays on him. But really it's the topography out here, Mine Run itself, that's going to be the issue. Lee is going to be so dependent on that topography, in fact, that he's going to be reluctant to take the offense himself. And of course, we all think of Lee as a very aggressive, offensive-minded commander. So the fact that he's content to stay behind his works means that he misses out an opportunity to sweep across these same fields. And on the morning of December 1st, he's finally going to lose patience because Meade hasn't attacked really, and he's going to send A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps across these fields, only to find that Meade has finally withdrawn. And then Lee's going to send his army in full-out pursuit, but Meade's going to be able to delay them and get himself safely across the army, safely across the Rapidan. And so that's going to really cost Lee an opportunity here at Mine Run because of these defenses. He gets a little too comfortable. Again, thinking ahead toward the Overland campaign where Lee really won't have the choice. He'll be forced to settle into the defensive positions. We kind of get a preview of that here, but he chooses the defense on purpose here. A brilliant, beautiful defense here at Mine Run. I'm going to turn you around just for a second here, give you the opportunity to see off in that direction a little community called St. Just. You can see the abandoned railroad cut there, and the railroad bed is off there against the far end of the field. And then, of course, we've got a lot of wide open space here as well. None of this is formally preserved with the exception of Payne's Farm, which was preserved by the American Battlefield Trust. Other than that, this is all just happens to be still in pretty pristine condition. The Confederate works are almost entirely intact through much of this line. And it's just been through the good grace of conscientious landowners that this has not really been developed. But hopefully someday this battlefield will get preserved. It is a vital part of the store of the Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia. I think it's George Gordon Meade's finest moment, the moral courage he shows here to call off that attack when he's got so much pressure on him. Don't forget, Ulysses S. Grant is just won the Battle of Chattanooga and lifted the siege out there, so his counterpart in the West has lots of stuff going on for him, and here Meade is not able to generate that same sort of success, despite all Washington going down. So Mine Run campaign is super important, often overlooked, but a vital part of this story. Thanks for spending some time with me out here today. As we can say, I'm one of those historians who's outstanding